Alright guys, here we are with another one of the excellent lecture series from the 2020 COVID school year. Today what we're going to be talking about is a war called the Boer Wars that exist, or that exist in the South African region of Africa. So hold with me. Before we get started, I just wanted to go through the notes guide with you guys real quick. Just remember there's 2 vocabs per usual. What's important to remember is that these are more of a slogan as opposed to a word. So you want to find out what the Scorched Earth campaign means. So don't just look up scorched, don't just look up earth, don't just look up campaign. Make sure you put it all together. What does it mean to have a Scorched Earth campaign? And then 2, what's a concentration camp? If you put concentration and then camp in separately, you're going to get a drastically different word from what we're looking at. So again, Scorched Earth campaign and concentration camp are phrases, not necessarily words. When you look at the notes guides today, make sure you're taking notes in the areas. When it comes to the questions and the summary at the bottom, remember you only have to do it in the last slide, unless you have questions, independent. So if you want to write 3 questions, go crazy. If you only write 2 or 3, that's okay. The 2 activities, there's a fill in the blank, so you just click on the box and you can type your answer there. You can't click anything else, so only click on the boxes. There's 5 answers at once. Again, the information are going to come from this video, or you can just look up the slides. And then lastly, there's movable facts. So if you look over to the side here, you're going to say rations based on status. Oh, that's part of the Boer camps. You're going to move these around to the camps that they belong. So that's your notes guides today. Make sure you finish those after watching the lecture or reading the lecture, and get those turned in. So without further ado, let's get started in talking about the Boer Wars. So what we have to remember is we're in South Africa. So the native population has now been displaced. You guys learned about the Zulus last time. They were the last great tribe of this region. They have been displaced by a larger, more formative army of both the Boers and the British. So we're at a point now where the white settlers, again these former Dutch of the Boers, and now the new whites of the British are fighting over this land. It's important to remember the reason they're fighting is over that gold and diamonds. So there's money to be made. The Boers, remember, they're former Dutch. They came over, and then once Napoleon took over the Netherlands, they became independent. And so now that they're independent, they run their 2 free states. The 2 free states they run are called the Orange Free State and the South African Republic, or Transvaal. So they have 2 separate countries run solely by the Boers. And then we have the British. So the British come in through Cape Town, they set up these camps, and they basically overly settle the land looking for gold and diamonds. If you think about like the gold rush in America, of all these guys going to the West Coast to run and get gold, it's similar. We have all these people now taking ships from Britain looking for cheap and easy money and gold and diamonds. They're going to strip the land down looking for mines. And so basically they're going to use their military strength to kind of just bombard the countryside, setting up mines over and over and over again. So we have these 2 groups of white people that are trying to abuse the land of Africa. And again, the reason they're able to is due to the increase in technology from the Industrial Revolution. They have guns, they have muskets, they have tanks, and they got it all. They have artillery, they have Gatling guns, so they're able to just mow through it. So again, just a reminder, diamonds found in 1866, gold in 1886. So in these time periods, we find these cash crops and bring in these excavators. If you know anything about current South African history, the city of Johannesburg, which is now the capital of South Africa in 2020, it doesn't exist prior to this gold rush. So the city simply pops up as a mining town, and prospectors show up by the thousands as they find more gold and they find more diamonds. So major cities today that exist in South Africa, they basically come from here, from this gold rush. Alright, so now we're at a point where the money is growing, the gold and the diamonds are here, and now it's all about territory. Who can have the most land to get the most mines set up? And the British, who have more power, more money, more wealth, decide that they're going to start to encroach into the Boer territory. So British citizens start going into these Boer countries, setting up shop, and existing inside of the countries. Originally, it's not a problem, but as the numbers grow, the British start to demand some power. They start to demand rights, and because of this, the tensions rise between these two people. So the British government starts demanding that their citizens inside of Boer territory get rights, and the Boers say, like, nah, we're good. The reason the Boers don't want to give up rights is because eventually the British will become the majority, and they will run the Boers out of town. So once they get 51% and they can vote, they'll simply vote these Boers out, and the Boers will be gone. So this leads to the Boer Wars. Big thing to remember is that the British win these wars, and they encroach and incorporate the Boer territories. So this is what leads to a unified South Africa. So again, if I look at a map today, you'll notice all three of these territories make up one country, because at the end of the Boer Wars, the British demanded all. What's important to remember, the other thing to remember, is these Boers, they weren't well equipped. They were outmanned, they were outnumbered, they had no chance to beat the British Army. So they moved to what's called a guerrilla tactics. So it's where you would grab a gun and fight against the British Army in small attacks and small bands. But during the day, you hide your guns and you blend into the countryside. So if you walk into my city, you couldn't tell who was a soldier and who wasn't. You just simply knew that we were all Boers. And then at night, we would then attack and then hide in our cities. So it made it very hard to find us. These small bands of soldiers would attack. They'd be gone. The large British army couldn't, what's the point of a Gatling gun, this huge gun that can just mow down fields of people if there's only 10 soldiers? Even more, what's hard to imagine is how do you fight back if this large army of thousands is trying to find 10 people and they're hidden among women, men, children. You don't know who's who, so you cannot find them. It makes them more annoying and dangerous because their numbers are so small, but it means that they cannot end this war. The war will not end simply because they've walked in with their bigger army. So the response to these guerrilla soldiers is a campaign called Scorched Earth. And I think the name says it all. Like, think about a field being burned. That's literally what they do to the countryside. They walk through, they burn down villages, they destroy cities in an effort to say, if you're Boer, we want you gone. Therefore, we'll remove the farmers, the children, the women, the workers, along with the soldiers. So in an effort to get rid of soldiers, they get rid of everything. On top of this, they not only go to Boer territory, they go into native territories because they are going to destroy everything. You'll see some pictures in class of scorched tents, cities, farms. Like, they literally burn the countryside. In an effort then to take care of these people, once I scorched your town and burned it to the ground, I put you into what are called concentration camps. This is the first instance in history of anything being called a concentration camp. So we had a high concentration of Boers placed into a small living area, and then that living area was monitored by British soldiers. The idea was we could just fill these concentration camps full of people, put fences around them, and then at least I had the native and the Boer population captive, so they couldn't fight me. And then the Boer soldiers who were fighting on the countryside would then be hidden. This idea to remember when we look at these concentration camps, they then split you by ethnicity. So if you were black, if you were a native African, you were put into one category. Funny to think, these black citizens could care less about the Boer Wars. They simply want to exist in their countryside. But because Boers could hide in their cities, the British burnt them down anyways. But these are the non-combatants, they're the non-enemies. You'd think that they'd be put into a better situation, but they're not. The Boer citizens are put into their own separate camps. Again, we have the white Boer camps, we have the black native camps. The idea, again, not voluntary, done because the British have burned down your living arrangements. Again, these Boer camps, the actual enemy of the war, you were given rations, so you were given a small amount of food. It wasn't great. The sugar was limited, salt was limited, water was limited. You were barely provided enough wood to keep yourself warm, not alone cook your own food. The meat given was often maggoty and spoiled, but again, you had food. Depending on whether or not they could prove you were a Boer family, or a family of a fighter depended on your rations. So people that knew that could be loyal to the British were given more. But because of these terrible conditions, like I said, maggoty meat, small amounts of rations, people died. Lots of them. 27,927 people died in these camps. And again, that's the enemies. Those are the people who are fighting against the Boers. The black camps, on the other hand, again, these are just native populations that happened to get in the way of the British. Were given no rations or no medical supplies. So if I was a former Zulu, and the British came through and burned down my city, I was put into a concentration camp and given nothing. What I could do was buy supplies. But again, I didn't have a job. I wasn't working. I couldn't afford them. So in order to afford these supplies, I would then have to work for the British. So the British almost had me enslaved to my own country. They could force me to work to afford the supplies so that they could live. This led to an expectation for work to supply stuff for the British for money and to be able to grow their own food, leading to the death of over 14,000 black Africans inside of the camp. Again, amazing to understand that these people were not fighting the war. They had no ill feelings towards the British. They simply were caught up in two other countries fighting. So, two things to remember about the Boer Wars is, one, the British now control all of South Africa. Two, we've set up these ideas of concentration camps, that we've set up these military installations to put removed people during war, and they're not good. In class you'll read about some examples of what these camps look like, but it kind of sets this tone. Concentration camps will come up again later in our discussion this semester. And then lastly, you're seeing in South Africa, which you'll need for your senior year, that the Boers, the white people of South Africa, are now drastically different than the black people. We've separated people in South Africa by race. Amazing to think, because the blacks are natives. This is their territory, their country, but yet we have separated them. If you have any questions, let me know. Good luck on the notes guides. I'll see you back in class.